So we're in a series, we started a series last week that asked a very important question. It's a question we believe that a lot of our culture is asking. The question is this: can we really know God? And as I've asked you over the last week or two, what's the best way to get to know someone? Your response has always been what? Talk to me. Spend time with them. Get to know them. And in the process, you'll get to hear them talk about who they are, right? Well, in the same kind of way, God doesn't hide who He is and how He wants to share Himself with us. God tells us multiple times throughout the Old Testament and through Jesus in the New Testament who He is. He says, I am. And so we're going to walk through some of that. And have you guys been around long enough to know that as you go through life, whatever your appetite, there's a difference between being full and being satisfied? I remember years ago where I lived when Chinese food buffets became popular. I remember the first time or two I went to a Chinese food buffet. If you're anything like me, and this is just between us, you gorge yourself like crazy, right? Because man, this is phenomenal stuff. And you eat and you're stuffed, and you go back and you get one nice little bit of fried rice, even though you know you shouldn't, and you eat it and it tastes so great, and you're like, I'm never eating again. But what happens? An hour later, you're what? I'm not the only one, am I? There's just something about it. You got full, but you never got satisfied. So what I did is I did that. I went back and got that last little bit of whatever it was that I love so much, like the orange chicken or the kung pao chicken or something. And then an hour later, I'm hungry. And here's what I do. I go into the house and I open my fridge. And I stand there and, yeah, you been to my house? Stand there and look at it, nothing. Shut the door. I walk over here and open my cabinets or my pantry or whatever's in your house. You see, I got potato chips, I got barbecue, I got sour cream and onion, I got plain Pringles, I got Doritos, I got ranch Doritos, I got nacho Doritos, I got spicy nacho Doritos. I got pretzels, I got peanut butter, I got cookies, I got Oreos, I got M&Ms. I was like, nothing. And then here's what happens. You go sit down, you watch about the next commercial, and then you get up and you go do it all again. Now, because you were full but you weren't satisfied, here's what happens in that process. You start pulling something out, eating a little bit of the chips, a little bit of the Doritos, a little bit of the Oreos, a little bit of the ice, finding something that will make you feel satisfied. And then about 2 hours later, about the end of your favorite television program or your favorite sporting event, you're sitting there feeling stuffed. Because you kept eating and eating and eating, not because you were hungry. You stopped being hungry 4 hours ago. But you keep eating and eating and eating because you're not satisfied. And food's not the only thing we do this with. Some of you have teenagers or grandchildren or teenagers. We fill our lives with all kinds of stuff. In this case, devices. Have you noticed that you can walk into a room and that teenager of yours will be having 3 conversations at the same time? They're having a verbal conversation with you while they're having a texting conversation with you while they're doing Facebook or Instagram with somebody else halfway around the world, right? And they got all these conversations going on. You go into your favorite doctor's office, dentist office, restaurant, grocery store, department store. What's going on? You've got music going on through all of the speakers, and in some of the more retail-oriented centers, you've got multiple television screens here and there, either playing an ad for their product. You can't even pump your gas without staring at a screen trying to sell you something with all that noise coming at you, right? You got all that noise happening. We've got all this technology going on, and we're dealing with it, and we're trying to fill our lives with stuff because being full and being satisfied are not the same thing, and yet our culture thinks they are. The great J.D. Rockefeller got asked one time, how much money is enough? And Rockefeller's response was this: just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. And you don't have to be a Rockefeller to know that. Most of us have just a little bit more stuffed into our garages, stuffed into our basements, stuffed into our closets. And when we stuff all those full, we go out and pay an extra $150 or $200 a month to stuff them in storage areas, right? We all want just a little bit more. It's why America is the only country week. And I said, well, you look fine now. And she said, yeah. I said, how'd you fix it? And she said, retail therapy. I said, what'd you do? Pointed at that refrigerator, and it was a refrigerator that had Wi-Fi, and you could talk to it, that Alexa could run it. She spent like $4,500 on it. Wasn't too much long after that, saw her again, and talked about the same thing. She said, I love retail therapy. She said, I had a bad day. I said, what'd you do? 7-carat diamond. It's the desire for more. We are driven by a need for more. And we're afraid to let go of some of the more that we've accumulated. So I encourage you, right this second, in the privacy of your own mind, ask yourself this question. What do I have that I can live without? What do I have that I can live without? Now, the good news is, this isn't just a 21st century thing. This isn't just an American thing. This is a universal and humankind thing. It was the same thing that was going on back in Jesus' day. If you got your message notes out there, you see a little line that says, seeking fullness in Jesus' day. See, in the Gospel of John, chapter number 6, the story begins with Jesus feeding the 5,000 men plus the women and children. You know, nobody thought to bring a sack lunch. Nobody thought to run into town at McDonald's, grab some Big Macs and come back and take care of everybody. They were out there. Jesus feeds them all. And then if you remember that story, at the end of that, Jesus goes to the other side of the lake. And then, like the next day, the people go over there and they find him. They're like, Jesus, when did you get here? And Jesus has fed them till they had their full. And he's fed them protein and carbs, also known as loaves of fishes. And when they asked Jesus about that, Jesus said to them, yesterday I fed you and you ate until you were full. Okay? Now, 24 hours later, they're coming back to Jesus and they're asking him about another miracle. Would he do another miracle? Basically, they're saying, Jesus, what can you do for me now? Or in American terminology, we say, what have you done for me lately? Because if you haven't done it for me in the last 24 hours, or the last 36 hours, or God forbid, the last week, if you haven't done it for me lately, it's like you haven't done it at all. Because we seek fullness, not satisfaction, right? And so, Jesus is having this conversation with them, kind of picking up the story midstream in John chapter 6. You read these words. So the people answered, show us a miraculous sign. Now this is so crazy. 24 hours ago, nobody had anything to eat. He took the little 8th grade boy's G.I. Joe lunchbox that had a couple of fish and some bread in it and fed however many thousands of people, right? And now we are 24 hours later. If you want us to believe in you, what can you do? What have you done for me lately, Jesus? That was yesterday. It's old news. It's a 24-hour news cycle. After all, check this out. After all, our ancestors ate manna while they journeyed through the wilderness. Underline that phrase. We're going to come back to that kind of heritage in a few moments. Our ancestors ate manna while they journeyed through the wilderness. The scriptures say Moses gave them bread from heaven to eat. And Jesus said, I'll tell you the truth. Moses did not give you bread from heaven. My Father did. And now he offers you the true bread from heaven. The true bread of God is the one who comes down from heaven and gives life to the world. Sir, they said, give us that bread every day. And Jesus replied, I am the bread of life. And whoever comes to me will never be hungry again. And whoever believes in me will never be thirsty again. Jesus had just done all of this. He just fed them. 24 hours later, they're like, well, we don't know if you really are God, right? Give me more, right? I want to be full again. And Jesus is like, no, I want to teach you something about yourself. They were full yesterday. Now they're coming to him wanting says to us through this story right there in your outline. Fullness makes us consumers more than enjoyers. See, when I keep going, after I go to the Chinese buffet and I keep going to my fridge and I keep going to my freezer and I keep going to my cupboard, it's not because I'm full. It's not because I'm enjoying it. It's because I'm just consumed with it. See, the moment we buy anything, we experience a letdown. If you don't believe me, ask a golfer. The worst thing a golfer can do is take a swing or two with somebody else's golf club. Because then the first thing that pops into their head is, I'm just one new golf club away from a better score. Any golfers in here want to say amen? That's the truth. Any golf widows in here want to attest to that? That's the way it works. The worst thing they can do is take a swing from somebody else's golf club. And the people there in that story where I asked you to underline it, they were asking Jesus about his ancestors. Because here's what they were doing. In the same, with Moses, for those of you who may not be quite familiar with the story, as they wandered through the wilderness on the way to the promised land, there wasn't like a lot of foods out there. There wasn't a Walmart and a Fry's and an In-N-Out, at every other mountain. And so God provided them manna every morning, well, every evening. And they could go out and they could take as much as they want. But no matter how much they took, if they didn't eat it, it would spoil overnight because God was giving them brand new and fresh the next day. So all these people know that story. But what they're asking Jesus is Jesus not to give us manna, not to give us quail. They're saying, Jesus, here's what I want you to do. I want you to remove my worries about tomorrow. Jesus, when I go to bed tonight, I want you to give me perfect assurance that when I wake up tomorrow, you will have taken away all of my problems. And we do it in the 21st century, don't we? We do it in Mesa, Arizona, don't we? We think, God, if I, then will you? God, if I go to church tomorrow, will you help my marriage this week? God, if I give money to that new campus and that new building, will you maybe give me a new job? God, if I start going to a small group, will you heal my medical condition? God, if I go out and help serve the homeless, will you make sure that my children have everything they want? We're going to God and we're saying, God, if I, will you? The problem with all of that is we live in a sense of denial. And in that process, we turn our faith into this lifetime certificate of deposit. We think that God's just going to do. So here's why I say this next phrase in your outline. Jesus offers satisfaction, but the people are chasing fullness. Now here's what I would encourage you to do. There's plenty of room there in your notes. Cross out the word people and write in the word I or we. See, when life is about choosing fullness, happiness is always temporary. Because no matter how full you have gotten, no matter how happy you seem when you walked away from the buffet, or you walked away from the electronics store, you walked away from the sporting goods store, you walked away from Nordstrom's, there's always going to be another one. There's always going to be another need. You're always going to have to experience another crisis. And you were full in that moment, but when that hit, the fact that you weren't satisfied begins to reveal itself. And so if the goal is satisfaction over fullness, what are some of the practices of satisfaction that we can step into, that we can begin to employ in our own lives and situations? Jesus said, I am the bread of life. And they were said, prove it to us. Do another miracle. What have you done for me lately? Jesus looks at them and says, I am the bread of life. What Jesus is saying in that passage through them to us, I believe, is this. I don't want you to spend your life chasing fullness. I'm offering you satisfaction. I'm offering you contentment. I'm offering you peace, regardless of your circumstances. Circumstances are fleeting. Would you agree? You can have a great day today and a bad day tomorrow and a great day on Tuesday. Sometimes you control your circumstances. Sometimes you have no say-so in the circumstances. But they are cyclical in life. And Jesus is saying, I want to be the bread of life. I want to be your sustenance. I want to be your peace. I want to be your satisfaction. I want to be your contentment. I don't want you chasing the fairy tale. So how do you get there? If you really want to pursue satisfaction as your goal, and not just more, not just fullness, what are some of the things you can do? Number one, fasting and self-denial. Now, what is fasting? Fasting is denying yourself food for a certain season or a certain period of time for a spiritual reason. That's fasting. Denying yourself food for a certain season or a certain period of time for a spiritual purpose or a spiritual reason. And then the other one is self-denial. Why do I distinguish those? The Bible only recognizes one form of fasting, and that's food. We want to curb it. I'll give up going to the gym for Lent. And I'll give up spinach. Self-denial is giving up yourself the other physical pleasures in life. So with fasting, you're denying yourself what we consider physical sustenance in exchange for spiritual sustenance. You're denying yourself what you can control and what you can build in your life. And you're emptying yourself of all of that so that you are empty for then to God to fill you with Himself, with His Holy Spirit, with His love, His peace, His joy. But as long as we're full and always needing more, we never learn that we have to fully rely on God because there's no place in Him anywhere, for Him anywhere within us. And in that process, what we do is we make Jesus the source of our satisfaction. You say, well, David, how do you do fasting? I'm not going to go too deep into this. It's actually one of my personal spiritual passions. But it's all about giving these things up. Think about the amount of time you spend on an average day eating. Just breakfast, lunch, dinner, ice cream during TV, Doritos at 2 in the morning, Oreos because you can. What if you replaced those hours where you were filling yourself with physical food? And as you emptied yourself, you allowed God to fill you with Himself because you replaced that eating time with praying time, reading scriptures, spiritual meditation, or going out and serving others who can't always eat those times. What if you denied yourself some of the things that are available to us, and in the process of denying yourself an extra 45 minutes on your favorite tablet or on your favorite screen or watching your favorite show, if you put all that down and you were no longer texting and you were no longer Instagramming and you were no longer Facebooking and you were no longer Netflixing and all that stuff, you then have all kinds of free time to do something that is unimaginable. Actually spend time with people. Spend time with your friends. Spend time with your family. Sharing yourself with them in that process. Jesus is saying this. Through fasting and denial, here's what you do. By saying no, you're giving your spirit authority over your body. By saying no. No to food, no to pleasures, no to all those things. You're giving your spirit complete authority over your body. Number 2, move from expecting to accepting. I grew up in the hills of Southern Ohio. We grocery stores. And so when we came in from school every night, Dad came in from work, I can literally think of maybe 3 or 4 times in my entire childhood when Mom would say, "Hey kids, what do you want for dinner?" And while we were looking at each other because we were a little bit shocked, before we could respond, every single time she went, "Oh, never mind." Because growing up, we didn't have a lot of meal options. Here's what my mom made. Every night, my mom very carefully made a meal called Take It or Leave It. And I know when I walked in those horrible days when my mom thought that people actually ate liver and onions, I was having peanut butter and jelly. There weren't a lot of options. And Mom did those things to us, and yet she says she still loves us. But when you move from expecting to accepting, understanding that my mom was providing for us and we chose to accept that, when you don't do it, here's the third thought that happens. Your choosiness does not lead to happiness. I've learned that all these years later. I'm a picky eater. I own it. But I'm promising you, choosiness does not lead to happiness. See, we think that when we're full and we have full choices, that equals happiness. That we have choices, and choices produces happiness, and happiness produces satisfaction. In the words of Dr. Phil, ask yourself, how's that working for you? If you think about most of our prayers, well, I can't speak for you, I'll just speak for me because you guys are way more spiritual than I am. Most of my prayers are telling God what I want. You guys know that I write in my prayer journal, and it's like, God, I want because we're doing this. And God's like, David, I never thought of that. Where'd you get that? David, you should be up here helping me do other people's prayers. It's not how it works, is it? And there's nothing wrong with asking God for things. But if you were to actually sit down and track your prayers, how much, if you prayed 2 hours a week, probably close to an hour and 45 minutes of that is spent asking God for stuff or telling God what you want. And we do that. I do it, and you do it, and you know what? I even caught myself one time. I want to say, I wish, God, I want. God, would you give me? I saw that in his catalog. I like that. And I'm probably not the only one. But over the years, I would like to think that I've matured a little bit in my relationship with my Father. And here's what I've learned to do. I've learned to pray differently. There's far more humility in my prayers these days. There's boldness. God asks us to do that. Don't not trying to lock me in the corners, but there's some semantics here. But I've learned to pray differently. Pastor and author Rob McQuay says it like this. Here's one of the prayers that he learned to pray when he was going through these things. He says, Lord, thank you for what is set before me today. Help me to recognize and enjoy the blessings you will offer me. I am going to choose to be thankful. See, when you pray a prayer like that, here's what you do. You make being satisfied more important than being full. And when you make that kind of prayer, we have a tendency not to talk to God so much about our careers and our families and our housing and our possessions and our pursuits and our service from the God, I want you to, God, will you, God, help me to. But when we take this kind of approach, We see our careers as a blessing. We see our families as a blessing. We see our homes as a blessing. We see our possessions as a blessing. We see our pursuits as a blessing. We see our service as a blessing. Because getting full is something that we control. It's something that we choose. But when it comes to being satisfied, we need God's help. And in crying out to Him, God assists us and God makes it happen. How many of you remember Christmas morning when you were children? Do you remember getting up and all the excitement and all the energy, and you had to stay in bed till a certain time because your parents were up at 3 o'clock in the morning rapping, so you couldn't get up too early, right? And you got up, it's like being shot out of a cannon. I mean, you were excited when you were children because that meant there were going to be gifts, there was going to be excitement, there was going to be this unexpected discovery, and it was all about you. Well, what if, just for this week only, between the time we walk out of here today and the time we walk back in here next Sunday, what if everyone who calls Connect Church their home all practiced one thing this week? What if we got up every day this week and acted as if it was Christmas morning, spiritually speaking? That instead of focusing on all the less exciting parts of our days and the meetings we anticipate at work and the problems we expect to have and what the children are going to do, what if we got up every day and in a sense of great expectation, a great anticipation of being God offering blessings, that we focused on people, and we focused on school, and we focused on work, and we focused on home, and we focused on the food, because God is gifting that to us. See, every day, you're going to get up, and depending on where you are at this stage in your life, you have some rhythm or routine. It might involve a job that you like or dislike, but whether you like or dislike it, you're going to have certain struggles, you're going to have certain tensions, there's going to be certain problems. If there weren't problems to be solved, they wouldn't pay you to be there, right? For others of us, we're retired, but we know that we're facing this medical issue, or we're trying to face this issue within our own financial situation within retirement, or we're facing this issue with our family, or the grandkid was in an accident, or our children got divorced. There's always something that's going on that's going to be there. What if we come to understand that this side of heaven, those kinds of things are always going to be a part of life because of the tension going on between the power of evil and the power of God? But God has redeemed us, yes, so that we can spend eternity with Him and have a relationship with Him, but God has redeemed us and then left us here because He wants to bless us and utilize us in the midst of all of that. And the satisfaction comes from understanding that, yes, I'm going to go through some tough things today. Yes, there are going to be some issues today. But God, I appreciate the fact that you have trusted me to go through these, and you have positioned me to do so, and you have given me people around me who love me, a church who loves me. I've got food to eat. I've got a place to sleep. I've got a car to drive. I have somebody to drive me if I don't have a car. God, it might be a tough day, but God, thank you for the blessings you're going to offer me as I go through this day. I have a friend back in Atlanta, Georgia. They found a mass in her thyroid area. And she was sitting in a room with 2 other women waiting to get the results back. And one of the ladies just happened to mention that anytime masses are discovered and people are gathered in medical settings like that, that 2 out of the 3 people, 67% of people, will be cancerous. And my friend looked around the room, knowing that only one of them was going to walk out really good about the day. And not knowing what the results were going to be for any of the 3 of them, she just started talking kind of in these lines. You know, one of us is probably going to walk out of here with a smile, and the other 2 of us aren't. But what if God's put us in this room together? What if God wants us to know each other's names so that we can pray for one another? And she just kind of talked along those lines for about 5 minutes or so before the medical personnel walked through the door, and she found out that she was the one without the cancer. And how sitting in their room with two women who both found out they had cancer changed how she viewed every day of her life. Anybody here watch the Food Network? Anybody here admit to watching the Food Network? Well, one of the more popular shows on the Food Network is a show called Chopped. It's where they, I got some Christians in here. It's where they bring these chefs together from various parts of the world, and they have them compete, and they go head to head, and eventually you win a $10,000 prize, and then they put you in a pool of the people who won each of the $10,000 prize for a $50,000 prize. And a couple of years ago, there were two people competing on this show. One guy, he was a chef at a resort in the Adirondacks, and another lady, she owned a French restaurant in New York City. And the guy, they were competing, and they were neck and neck. There was very, very little level of discernment between their abilities and the food that they produced. And both of them said later that as they stood there, they expected the other person to win. And they asked the man, they said, if you win, what are you going to do with your $10,000? Now, he worked at a resort up in a beautiful area in upstate New York, and so he was going to get himself a cabin and maybe make life up there. He was pretty excited about it. And then they asked the young lady, they said, if you win, what are you going to do with your $10,000? And she said, well, I just received word recently that my grandmother back in Paris, where I haven't been for several years because of finances, is dying. I'd like to see her one more time. And so if I win, I'm going to use my $10,000 to pay for the flight back to Paris to go see my grandmother for her dying days. And of course, the judges, and they bring the drama music, and of course, they go to a commercial and make you wait. When you come back, that pair of chefs are holding hands. And they announce the winner. And it was the man. And everybody applauds, and she gives him a hug. And they always have the person who lost walk away, and they talk to the winner. And she was walking away, and he stopped her and he said, Yohani, come back. And he said, what you need to do with $10,000 is far more important than what I plan to do. You take the check. Now later he was being interviewed. That's never happened on any show before of any kind that I can recall. He was being asked about why it was that he did that. And here's what he said. He said, before God, I was a jerk. I was okay stepping over people if I wanted. But now I'm able to do things with grace. And that's why he gave her the check. And then he said these words. He says, what I discovered from my faith is that it's not about the destination, but it's about the journey. And today, the journey was great. The value of the journey for you and me, folks, is choosing to make Jesus the sustenance, the satisfaction of our lives. Jesus said to the people back then, and I think he's saying to you and me today, I am the bread of life. I am your satisfaction. You can find fullness in almost every other relationship, every other career, every other meal, every other purchase, every other endeavor, but you can only find lasting satisfaction in me. And so the question for you to answer, maybe you'll get a chance to play around with this in your connection groups this week. The question for you to answer is this. Are you satisfied, or are you just spending another day trying to get full? Here in just a moment, I'm going to pray. Would you bow your heads? I'm going to ask you to keep them bowed. Anybody want to say, hey, David, I've been trying to get full in a lot of ways, but I really want to be satisfied this morning. And you just lift your hand up and back down. That's all you got to do. No one's going to tap you on the shoulder or anything. Yeah. Let me pray with you. God, we can seek fullness buffet, or our favorite electronic store, or our favorite online store, be it our favorite electronic device, a tablet or phone or computer or laptop or television, be it the radio that plays in our car, the televisions that play in our homes. There's a lot of noise, God. And we seem to be a culture that is consumed with wanting more. And yet more never satisfies. If more satisfied, there would probably be no storage facilities. My home would have fewer closets. We'd only buy one set of golf clubs in our life. But more never satisfies, God. Sometimes it's fun. That's true. No doubt about it. But satisfaction, that comes only through you. Through knowing you, loving and being loved by you, denying ourselves for you, and when we empty ourselves, I don't know exactly how this works, I just know that it does. You fill yourself with up. You fill us with yourself. You've created us, Lord, to live in relationship with you and in relationship with one another. You teach us to love as you loved. And thousands of years ago, when people came to you and said, that was yesterday, God, what have you done for me lately? You said, oh, you just want more. Here's what I'll do for you today. I'll satisfy you eternally. So, Father, for those of us in this room who struggle with the difference between fullness and satisfaction, I'd ask that you would put a yearning, an appetite in our spirits to know you more fully, that we might be satisfied with who you are. God, thank you for your goodness. Thank you for loving us, caring for us, sharing yourself with us. We give you all honor and all glory in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, here in a couple of minutes, I want to release you guys to go golden crowd. Thank you for getting that. Nobody else did. But at 11:30, we'll meet over at the facility to pray. Here's the deal. We don't have to tear a single thing down. Not here, not children, because there's no school this week. So all of y'all can come over and pray. But I would encourage you to join us. We are not been in the school. We've not been passing the offering plates. We still believe that giving is an act of worship first and foremost. Your generosity makes it possible for us to meet here, to have these screens and music, and to go out what we're doing. We do have the offering baskets that are carefully protected over there by the door. You're prepared to give. We know that dozens and dozens of you give online faithfully, you give digitally. We appreciate that. But we're just glad that you came and shared this weekend with us. Did you have a good experience this morning? We're glad you came. If those God bless you, go and